And you did something I really admired, which is you tried to elevate non-traditional candidates out in different parts of the country. You're the reason why I became a Richard Ojeda fanboy and supporter and became friends with Richard. We ended up hiring several people from his campaign staff in West Virginia. So if you want to talk about some of the work you've done to try and address the problems that you and I are describing right now.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what we were saying about some elements of the Democratic Party having contempt for certain regions of the country, for working class people, in particular, white working class people, as you very much discovered. And but I think, there's so much class contempt in our society in general, so much looking down the nose, so much, condescension towards working class people who we're discovering now more than ever. I mean, they're essential workers today, of course, but they're always essential workers. These are literally the people who make our country run. Like, we're completely dependent.
There are going to be a lot of people in urban locations right now that are going to absolutely freak out if there's a supply chain disruption out of Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, where if meatpacking workers and truck drivers decide not to do what they're supposed to do, we're going to find out just who's important very quickly. And there are people right now that are worried about that happening.
You are 1,000% correct. I don't know if you followed this Perdue chicken processing plant, I believe down in rural Georgia. And the workers were protesting because they weren't getting hazard pay. They didn't have safety protective equipment. And one of the workers was like, we are out here risking our lives for chicken. Right? And that's like, to me, so telling, and is also kind of a central theme of your campaign, like just respecting people's humanity, treating their lives as more important than having the shelf fully stocked at all times with Perdue chicken nuggets. I mean, it's really that basic. And so one of the things that I believe profoundly in is representation of working class people in the halls of power. Not in like a focus group or in a poll or like,
come on, Krystal. All we have to do is find out what magic words to say to them and then check
exactly.
that box.
The messaging. You just got to change the brand. Right? Or like as human sort of props, but, behind a politician who's speaking. No, I think working class people should have power, be the ones holding power. Because they are the ones, not just today, but always on the front lines in our economy. And just as representation matters for diverse communities, it matters that you have people who are our servers and our waitstaff and our delivery workers and people working in warehouses, or like you mentioned, Richard Ojeda, who's a veteran who served our country. Like, it matters to have those people not just being pandered to, but actually having power. And I believed in my, I'm sort of becoming less hopeful about the Democratic Party at this point, if we're being honest. But I really think that one of the ways that the Democratic Party could bridge this divide that has been artificially inserted between the white working class and the black and brown working class is by having more voices that are themselves working class. And so you don't have that sort of cultural barrier of people like, I saw the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee supporting these lobbyists who barely lived in the district, and they'd come back and they'd get a consultant to tell them how to talk to people in their own hometown. It's like, what are you doing? Why not find people who understand their community, who talk like their community, share, aren't just viewing this as an outsider, they actually share in the struggles of that community. Why not try to elevate those individuals and see what happens in terms of how they wield power and who they ultimately represent? So Richard is a great example of that. JD Scholten, who is running again.
JD, yes. JD's going to win. Let's go, JD.
In Iowa, he's, just a great guy, right?
Great guy.
That's the best.
I donated to JD just the other day. Just continue if there are other people like JD and Richard.
Yes, and by the way, and running against a particularly odious member of Congress, Steve King.
Yeah, Steve King's that guy who literally even the Republicans kicked him out of the committees because he got a little too blatantly racist.
Yeah, he's from Iowa, okay, which was not a part of the Confederacy, and he still had a Confederate flag on in his office. I mean, this is like what we're talking about. But so people like JD, there's another woman down in North Carolina I love named Dee Adams. She got her start. She was a teamster working on a line in a factory. I mean, you know, I think we need more of that in the Democratic Party in particular, and politics in general. I mean, you just don't have those voices represented. So that's something that I believe in and have tried to work on, try to highlight some of those folks.
Well, I was so confused where when I would meet people who are working class in different parts of the country, and when I said I was a Democrat, they were like, "Oh no," and I was like, "Man, you really hate Democrats around here." And I was like, "Aren't we supposed to be sticking up for you, the truck driver, you, the farmer, you, the waitress? Like what the heck has gone wrong for the Democratic Party where working class Americans don't think it's their party in a lot of the country?" Like that to me is like the central theme that we seem to be missing.
It truly for me is heartbreaking because I've always seen myself as a Democrat, and I've always believed that the Democratic Party was the party of the working class. But, you know, this is frankly, it's been an intentional shift, right? And this started with Bill Clinton in the 90s. There was an intentional decision to orient the party more around sort of, you know, white collar, affluent suburbanites. Not that there's anything wrong with those individuals, but that's a very different kind of politics because you're talking about people economically who more or less benefit from the status quo. So they're not interested as much in putting sort of those, you know, transformational economics at the center of their political agenda. And so that decision has translated over many years to where we are now that, you know, the Democratic Party year after year after year has become more centered around that demographic. The politics are more representative of their perspective. And then, you know, for the black and the brown working class, it's basically like, well, you can't vote for the Republicans because they're too racist, so you're stuck with us. And the Republicans do their own version of that, right? They've got like their affluent interests that they cater to. And then to the white working class, it's like, oh, well, those Democrats hate you. They have contempt for you, so you're stuck with us. And what happens when you divide the multiracial working class like that is you've ended up with two parties that basically represent affluent interests. And I'm not trying to say like they're both equivalent or there's no difference between the two.
No, it's true.
Of course. But if you look at this response on coronavirus, the economic response. I mean, every single senator voted to give $4 trillion, which is much more than the media typically reports, but they are leveraging the amount that was in the bill. The Federal Reserve is leveraging that to give $4 trillion in loans to big business. The Small Business Fund that, you
evaporated in days.
No, like that. And we knew it would. This was entirely predictable. Why is there even a cap on that fund? The amount to individuals, pathetic, and one-time payment. And you've got millions who are getting kicked out of their jobs, filing for unemployment. I mean, these are all choices that were made. None of this is inevitable. These are all choices that were made, and they are the byproduct of two parties that have the interests of the affluent first. And so I think, you know, the results of that could not be more clear than outrageously in this moment. And with that small business, I mean, this just completely outrages me. And, you know, I'm sure you know people and I know people as well who are
totally left out in the cold. They're like applying and getting no response.
And trying to keep their businesses afloat, trying to keep their employees employed, trying to be able to pay their rent, you know, for their business, for their location. And because the implementation of this program, first of all, the dollar amount way too small. Why is there a cap at all? Second of all, the implementation is left to the banks who were just learning,
dumb.
gave concierge service to their biggest clients.
Any client of theirs just got the red carpet, and then if you didn't have a private banker, you were fucked.
That's exactly right. Had they had special concierge service and all the mom and pop small businesses got screwed. And so what are we going to see coming out of this crisis? Rather than, you know, the kind of reinvigoration of small businesses, of local industry, of keeping wealth, you know, locally in our communities. That was one possible outcome of this crisis. And instead, we're going to have the exact opposite.
Yes.
Amazons, the Walmarts, the Apples of the world, they're just going to get bigger and bigger. And I just was reading before we started talking, something like 100,000 shops, stores are likely to go under as a result of this. And again, that was a choice made in a bipartisan fashion by both of the parties here.
A lot of these jobs are not coming back. It's heartbreaking. I see the same things. And to me, the best course of action would be for the government just to be like, look, just send us the bill. Like, you know, like, hey, landlords, don't charge your tenants. Send us the bill. Hey, like hey, businesses, you have rent, send us the bill. We're just going to pay for it over this multi-month period of time. And then when it's time to reopen, then you can just come back. But until then, like, we got it. And you're right. Like, what is the purpose even of a cap? Like, it doesn't make any sense. You know, when you're talking about trying to elevate people from different backgrounds into leadership, it reminded me of German companies that have board seats for people who are in the factory or the manufacturing plant. Like, you literally have people with high school or the equivalent of high school educations, but they had a lot of technical, you know, apprenticeships and training. But literally, like, from the shop floor, just sitting there in the boardroom being like, hey, that's a bad idea. It's a good idea. And like, you know, the decision making is going to be entirely different for the fact that those people are genuinely there, not just expressing that perspective, but pulling the lever. Right. That's the kind of thing we would need in our government wholesale. Yes. It's like you had people who actually just said, like, hey, guess what? You know, like, like my people are putting their lives on the line for fucking chicken nuggets. And, you know, they don't have adequate protection. They're getting paid like chicken scratch, probably almost like, you know, literally. And the rest of it. I mean, it's infuriating. It's heartbreaking. You know, like, I'm grateful that at least we've moved the needle on this conversation where it seems like there's going to be an openness and enthusiasm to universal basic income that they're, because to me, it's like tens of millions of Americans are going to get money in their bank accounts and they're going to be like, well, that was great. And then when someone says, hey, you should probably do that all the time, then people will be like, that's probably an excellent idea. But you're right. Like, we've mishandled this in so many ways.